favorite listeners. Well, if you listen, you're my favorite listener, right? So, welcome to another super cool podcast. And again, I think they're super cool. Hopefully, because you're listening, you do too. Mastery Vibes Peer Support Unleashed. We've got the fabulous Charlotte, as always, and the super cool Sean. Hey, Sean, do you just want to tell us a little bit about yourself before we crack on into the topic today?
Yeah, hey everybody. My name is Sean Gartrell, and I'm a person who identifies as being in long-term recovery. And for me, that means I no longer have problematic relationships with drugs or alcohol. I'm also, because of my recovery, get to be the director of operations with Advocates for Recovery Colorado, a recovery community organization based in Colorado.
We just love hanging with Sean. Charlotte and I get the privilege of running training virtually in Colorado with Sean and many, many people out there and just have the best time. And we were just having a conversation with Sean about like when we work in this field and we have our own lived experience of mental health or substance use, whatever, that there's a place about, I think sometimes the expectations of us are maybe that we're all good now and we never kind of fall or stumble. And, we were having this conversation about, well, if you do feel like you're stumbling a little, however you might describe it, right? Um, like, where do you go? How do you get support once you reach a certain place in the world of lived experience, peer support? Like, I want to throw it open to Sean because I know he's got some cool thoughts, and then you can hear from Charlotte and I too. But yeah, Sean.
Yeah, so I had this experience a few months ago in the end of 2025 where just some life events happened. Lost my grandma, lost an uncle, some other relationship stuff. And I was just in a place where I felt like I needed a little bit more support than I normally get from my peer supporter friends and coworkers and from, the therapist I see every now and then. And I got it in my head that maybe going to a crisis center would be like a little 72-hour vacation from the world and I could kind of get my stuff together, right? But the moment I walked in to the crisis center, I had this realization that I know the person who's in charge of this place, and I know half of the staff who works here. And on top of that, like the org I work for brings a group in there. And so I would probably see one of my staff members providing group at one point, and I was just like, this isn't the place for me anymore. Like 5 years ago, this maybe would have been an okay, resource for me, but I just wasn't comfortable walking in that moment. And so that's my experience around that. And I ended up reaching out to more peer support friends and colleagues and, engaging in more self-care. And I didn't really need a 72-hour holiday in a crisis center. But sometimes we get things in our heads about like, what do I need and what is the best route for me? And so where do we go when we're in the position of being the helper that now needs our own help?
Yeah, it's one of those interesting ones. I've often wondered if there's a place where there could be a great B&B for people who work in the sector but want to go where there isn't people they know. Wouldn't it be cool if there was this fabulous bed and breakfast that just took care of us in different states that we could check into and get the kind of support. It'd be awesome if it was peer run, but let's just, have a peer run fabulous B&B that takes care of us. I don't, I don't think I always want to call it respite, although, that's cool too. But there was this very cool place in New Zealand. It was a number of years ago, and this one was specifically for women, but it was women often who worked in the sector, and people would go there, and it wasn't me. My ex-partner went there, and like when you came in, they assigned you a time for a bubble bath and reflexology, and if you wanted to paint or if you wanted a place to just go and read, and it was like this luxury spa. And I remember her saying, "Oh my God, that was the best. I just needed to get out of life for a little bit, but I I didn't want to go to places where I knew people for that break." And I think sometimes we have the internal stigma stuff about, oh, what will people say if I walk in there because I'm whatever, I'm in this role, or and then there's sometimes that external stigma too. I remember giving a keynote once in Georgia, and I shared that I was feeling suicidal at the time, but I was dealing with it. And people came up afterwards and said, "I didn't think people like you who did keynotes and stuff ever felt like that." And it's like, yeah, actually, I still have my stuff, and some days it's more prevalent than others. And I remember once when I was working, they were called consumer consultants or advisors in New Zealand, where you were kind of sitting with like on the quality management team, the Sentinel events team, strategic planning. And I was dealing with lots of clinicians in my role as well. And I remember saying, they called me an intellect consumer. They said, "Oh, you're the one that, functions really well at work, and sometimes you have speed wobbles outside of it." And I went, "Oh my God, they've even labeled me in this kind of thing." Or, Sean, I don't know if you've ever had the, "Oh, maybe you were just misdiagnosed and you don't really have that issue because look at you now." And I think that adds to that place about, do we feel like we can go and get support from a multitude of places when we need it? And like, how do we set that up for our sector? And Charlotte, I'd love to hear your perspective, because I know like families are going to have similar kind of issues, like different the way it's described, but yeah.
Right. Well, I think different and similar. So one of the things that when you were talking, both of you, that I was thinking about is a few of the family peer supporters. They used to come to a group that I co-facilitate for their own support, and then they started to refer families that they're working to come to that group, and that caused the family peer supporters to stop coming because they didn't want to share what was happening in their world with the people that they support. And so thinking about, and I know, Sean, you've talked about it in training, when you're referring to what 12-step program you go to, you're very cautious about not referring people that you support, because that's where you go for your supports. So really thinking about it. But I was also reminded of a story, not really a story, an experience that Kristen and I had a couple of years ago. And a mom showed up for our group who was also one of the psychiatrists in a smaller community. And she outed herself. When I say outed, she says, "I'm a psychiatrist. I should know better." but I just can't seem to manage what's happening at home. And so as you all both were talking, I was thinking of her and the guts, because she was very stressed about showing up, and then she like I said, outed herself, and we all in the group embraced her and supported her, because she was a mom who was struggling with what was happening at home at the end of the day, and all of her schooling wasn't there. She needed support of others, which really validated the importance for family peer support, in my opinion, was watching this woman. And she came to our group for quite a while until life got a little easier. And then she said goodbye. Oh, it happens in all sectors.
I think sometimes we place the expectation on ourselves that we should have, and I'm cognizant of the way I'm describing it, but I can't think of a different word, but we should kind of have like superior skills to look after our recovery because we teach it and we work in it and we live and breathe it. And I'm like, but we're human and humans have shit happen. And that stuff impacts us. And I think there's still sometimes like this expectation, or maybe we've been taught that a normal response to significant issues isn't normal. It's still to do with our mental health. And Sean, I hope it's okay. I know when we talked, I was like, this is kind of a normal response to huge, impactful events. And I think there's still this little niggle in the back of our head sometimes that, is it really a normal response, or am I falling over here? Am I going back to how it used to be? And I see you nodding your head. Is there, like, do you want to share anything around that?
No, I mean, you just really summed up some of the thoughts that were going through my head at that time. This, like, yes, a lot is happening in my life, but also, like, is there something wrong with my brain for feeling the way I'm feeling while all of these things are happening in my life? And, I'm looking back, I'm really glad I didn't go to the crisis center because those have never really always been great experiences for me. Um, but it took talking to a few people just saying, like, what are you talking about, man? Like, you got a lot going on right now. You're allowed to feel overwhelmed and grieving and all of those big feelings. Like, just feel them and be okay with it. And it's hard. It's hard to put words to this concept of now I've made it. Shouldn't I not go back ever again? And it's just, well, that was me 10 years ago. And here I am 10 years later, having a little bit of a mentee bee, as the kids call it. And it was fine. Everything was fine. Like, sometimes I think we just need to step back from ourselves and, chat with people who can understand us.
For a minute, I was like, what's a mentee be? And then I was like, oh, mental breakdown. Got it. And look, how cool that kids can just say that. I'm having a little mentally be or mentee be, and like that's okay. I don't have to make a big deal out of it. I don't have to go, oh my God, I have to cut myself off to the next 20 days of going to 12-step because I thought about having a drink, or let me throw myself into like the psych ward or the crisis center. And it's that place about, I want to make sure that we support people who work in our industry to get, it's okay to still have feelings. it's okay to deal with feeling overwhelmed or suicidal or wanting to take a drink or a hit, and how do they get through that without thinking there's this massive thing wrong with them? Because I've also heard people say to me, oh, I still think about killing myself sometimes. Maybe I shouldn't be a peer worker. And I'm like, actually, because you think about that sometimes, that to me makes you an awesome peer worker, because you're not portraying this, I'm perfect. And I think sometimes I've heard people think that they can't have what I might call the speed wobbles, um, and still have this job that somehow we're meant to have recovered, like be in recovery and never have those speed wobbles. And I want to kind of dedicate my time when I'm with people to say, it's okay. And if those things happen, where can we look for support? And I love, Sean, that you reached out. I saw your call. I was like, what? Why are you calling me at this time? And it was like, no, I'm picking that up. I'm here because I know how tough it can be to reach out when we are kind of in our heads about should we or shouldn't we? And I hate those should and shouldn't. Well, we have a course on that. Um, but that place of, where do I go for support? Now that if I go for support, will everyone know? Like, will everyone hear that I had the speed wobbles? That's where my head goes. I don't know about yours, Sean or Charlotte.
Yeah, I mean, that was definitely in the back of my head. And it didn't help that some of the first people I went to, close friends and family, not from the industry, all I got was, what about your meds? Aren't you taking your meds? Do you need to call
I,
your doctor and get back on your meds? And so it didn't help that like the first five people I talked to are all like, oh, you should take some meds about that. Right. And finally, I started reaching out to some peer support friends, and I was like, okay, this is what I needed. I don't need a bunch of people telling me to get on some meds.
and that's my head was going there, Sean, when you were sharing that you lost your grandmother, you had some other losses in your life, and us on the family side are all watching to make sure you don't crack and putting your mental health challenges as he's a little more fragile, so therefore we need to pay more attention. He's a little bit more fragile, so maybe he needs to go back on some medication and it was life events for you. Those were major life events that had nothing to do with your diagnosis and everything to do with it was a life event. And I was thinking too of when my father passed away, and terrified that Sarah, my daughter was going to fall apart. And because in my world she was the one that was struggling the most, whereas all of us were mourning his loss. And I think that on the family side, if we can get our head around, let's support the entire family instead of focusing on the one that might be struggling the most. I just think it has a better outcome for the entire family.
It's interesting you were talking about that, Charlotte, because we were just in a conversation earlier today about families waiting for the other shoe to drop, right? Oh my God, they're going to have this, it's going to come back. And like, even when we do have the speed wobbles, like supporting us to get that it doesn't have to be about mental health or substance use. It can be about life. And so when you were saying that, I'm like, oh yeah, the other shoe's dropping. We're having a speed wobble. Let's get you into treatment or get you to the psych ward or get you back on your meds, instead of, actually, you know what? It's okay to have the feels. And just express the feels. And I mean, really different, but my mum's going through some stuff. She's getting older, and my brother's like, you just need to. And like, I'm sitting there going, just hear what she's got to say, bro. Like, actually, just listen. But I don't know, Sean, where do you think, um, as people, I mean, I'll be like, I'll get a big head right now, but we are people that our sector look up to. All three of us are kind of what the sector might call role models. I don't like that term, but and and
I
so
can say
when
experts in our field.
yeah, when not that, we're experts on ourselves, we've got some knowledge, but it's that, like, what would you like to see for people who are seen like that for like support? What do you think would be good to have, create, make it easier for us?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts about that. And what's interesting is the first conclusion that I came to chatting with my partner, my significant other, was the bed and breakfast that you mentioned. Like, that's really where we went. Like, we had the same conversation, and we decided that one of us needed to win the lottery so that we could open a peer respite for people that work in the industry. Only it wouldn't be a peer respite. It would be like a come chill with other people who work in the industry sort of thing. Um, and I think that's amazing. I don't know if there's money to be made there, but who cares if you win the lottery, right? The the other thing that came to mind is, since that happened, I realized that there's something to the whole like community of practice, right? And so I've been connecting more and more with people at like the administration level of organizations because we can support each other's in ways that the peer supporters don't really understand not being at the administration level. Right. And so I think that, me calling you Robyn is a good example of that, like lateral support from somebody who understands the stresses of where you are at in the field.
Yeah.
I know in Canada at one point, really early on, I think it might have even been when I was still living in the US, there was a group of executive directors that used to get together as peer orgs and talk, and it kind of fell by the wayside. But maybe there's layers of that community of practice for people in like those kind of roles. And then I don't know, there's a part of me wants to go out and see where there's some money for that bed and breakfast. I think it should be somewhere exotic, like Fiji or Tahiti, or, hey, come and have like your little time in a nice place. I don't know, Charlotte might know some cool places in Mexico like that would be good for that kind of thing. But I'd love to see us try and create something that's supported, because we lose people when they think they can't get support at different places. Charlotte, I know I jumped in over you. I'm sure. I'm going to try and be quiet.
Well, and I think that what you were saying, Sean, is so important is collectively in your supervisor roles or your admin roles to find time to support each other. Because I used to not be a fan of community of practices because I didn't see the value in it. And when I really started to immerse myself and understand what its purpose was, it really, really is helpful. And so what we do on the family side with the other facilitators that run groups, we meet once a month and we just have a what's going on in your life. And it's just about supports for each other. And that's what's been really helpful for all of us, because we lost that other support network. And it's separate from business. It's separate from the tasks of running groups. It's just a place to talk about what's happening at home. Because we still have stuff going on at home. We just we still need some support. I'm laughing because where my head was going in this conversation too, and I'm going to take us a little sideways, is when all of our peer training goes out the window and we like lose it, or and my family looks at me like, what happened to all your training? Like, where is this coming from? And that's where my human shows up. I'm like, ugh, you just go back to old patterns. And anyway, I was laughing at that. You've seen me when I've gone worst case scenario, and
Yeah. So to all our listeners out there, I'm going to put a pitch. If you think the B&B for, people like us in the field, or actually any peer supporters in the field, let us know. And, if we get enough support, maybe if, 100,000 people put in a couple of bucks each, we'd be able to, have some fun. Or if also let us know if you think there's a need for, or not a need, I think there probably is, but a willingness to jump on a community of practice. Maybe that's something Sean, Charlotte, and I can play around with, but let us know if it's something that you would utilize. And hey, if you know other people in the sector, ask them. Tell us to let us know. Flick us an email at info@robynpriest.com, or Robyn@robynpriest.com, or Charlotte@robynpriest.com. We'll let Sean off the hook. He probably deals with a few more emails than us at times. I'm feeling generous, Sean. I'm helping your mental health. I'm just assuming. But yeah, let us know. And if you've got other ideas, throw them out, because I think the more the merrier. And yeah, Charlotte, Sean, closing
the
kind
easiest
of
way,
thoughts.
I was going to say, Robyn, the easiest way for people to get us is just to comment in the messages in this podcast, because all the messages just go directly to us. So even easier, like us, subscribe and send us a comment, and we'll be happy to answer them and consider them.
Oh, Charlotte, see, that's why you're in here, because that techie stuff to me is like, ugh. But hey, the more likes we get, the more comments we get, the happier we are. Sean, want to kind of close this out with the words of wisdom?
That's a lot of pressure, Robyn. Words of wisdom.
Okay, just words. They don't have to be wise.
Well, it made me think of, wasn't it Bill and Ted that said, be excellent to each other? So I think let's be excellent to each other. And it's always a pleasure spending time with you all.
Oh my God, thank you.
Yeah, we love hanging out with you, Sean. You know that. I can hardly wait till our next training.
Yeah, me neither.
Catch you in the next podcast, everyone.